Members, we'll start today's proceedings, and as always, we'll start with the daily routine. Presenting and reading petitions. The Honourable Member for Digby-Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table a petition on behalf of the residents of Digby Neck, Long, and Briar Islands. These residents are applauding the dedication of the nurse practitioner who was serving their communities but was released by the Southwest District Health Authority. They are requesting that the Minister of Health intervene to have this nurse practitioner reinstated. It is signed by 502 residents of those areas, and I have affixed my signature.
The petition is tabled. Any further petitions? Presenting reports of committees. Table and reports, regulations, and other papers. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do this in my capacity as the Minister for Department of Natural Resources. I'd like to table the Spruce Bark Beetle Action Plan. The member for Victoria the Lakes and the member for Cape Breton West asked me questions on that. I made a commitment I'd table it, and so I do so.
The report is tabled. Any further reports, regulations, or other papers? Statements by ministers. Government notices of motion. The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I wonder if we might just introduce for the House the members of the Legion who are here with us in the House. Mr. Blanchard, Mr. Nash, Mr. Waters, and Mr. Hatcher. Thank you. Hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas, by wearing a poppy every year, Canadians remember the effort and sacrifice of the brave men and women who served the country. And whereas the poppy is the international symbol for those who died in war and was officially adopted in 1921. And whereas the importance of Canadian unity is felt on Remembrance Day and always in the hearts of those who remember by wearing a poppy. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House support this year's poppy campaign and pay tribute to Canadian soldiers who fought for freedom and democracy. And Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. Well, we certainly welcome our special guest here this afternoon to the Legislature. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Nova Scotia's library professionals and library volunteers are very important and valuable to public education, and whereas school libraries play a fundamental role in fostering literacy and encouraging a love of learning and reading. And whereas October is Canadian Library Month, and today, October 26th, is National School Library Day. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House recognize October 26th as National School Library Day, and the many library professionals and volunteers located throughout this province who are committed to promoting and sustaining literacy. Mr. Speaker, request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Tourism, Culture and Heritage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas representatives from Nova Scotia's diverse arts and cultural community gathered in Tuscan on Saturday, October the 24th, 2009, to celebrate achievement at the annual Creative Nova Scotia Awards Gala, and whereas Nova Scotia's most important arts award, the Portia White Prize, was presented at the awards gala to a Nova Scotian artist who has made significant contributions in their field, and whereas distinguished actor, director, and founder of Eastern Front Theatre and Ships Company Theatre, Mary Van Gogh, was chosen from 3 finalists as the recipient of this year's Portia White Prize. Therefore, be it resolved that this House congratulates Ms. Van Gogh on winning the Portia White Prize for 2009 and recognizes her accomplishments and contributions to the world of theatre and the overall excellence of artistic and cultural expression in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. Introduction of bills. Notices of motion. The honourable member for Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas since 1921 the poppy has stood as a symbol of remembrance and a visual pledge to never forget those young Canadian men and women who sacrificed their lives for the freedoms we enjoy today. And whereas today, Monday, October 26, 2009, representatives of the Royal Canadian Legion, Nova Scotia Nunavut Command honoured members of the legislature by presenting poppies to mark the beginning of the Legion's annual Remembrance Poppy campaign. And whereas monies raised from the annual Remembrance Day Poppy campaign are used to promote remembrance throughout communities and to serve veterans and their dependents. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the legislature wear our poppies as a pledge to never forget those individuals and their families who have paid the ultimate sacrifice, and extend our appreciation to all members of the Royal Canadian Legion, Nova Scotia Nunavut Command for their tireless efforts and dedication to communities throughout our province. Mr. Speaker, I'd ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the act of remembrance is the greatest honour we can bestow upon the men and women who have fought for our freedom. And whereas for the next few weeks leading up to November 11th, the Royal Canadian Legion Nova Scotia Nunavut Command will be conducting their annual Poppy campaign. And whereas today, October 26th, the Royal Canadian Legion Nova Scotia Nunavut Command presented members of this House of Assembly with the first set of poppies of the season. Therefore, be it resolved, all members of this House thank the Royal Canadian Legion for the work they do in our communities daily and for bestowing this honour upon us again this year. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice, passage without debate. Let us not forget.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Glenhaven Manor is a residential home that is committed to upholding the dignity of its residents and tenants. Whereas their mandate is to provide exceptional individual quality care to the residents and tenants in a safe environment by many dedicated and hardworking staff and volunteers. And whereas Glenhaven Manor is celebrating its 40th anniversary. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the Nova Scotia House of Assembly recognize the important work of the Glenhaven Manor does in Glasgow and congratulate them on their 40th anniversary. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without delay.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Official Opposition has requested the Conflict of Interest Commissioner to re-examine the sale of the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture's lobster boat and license and the possible conflict therein, And whereas Section 9 of the Ministerial Code of Conduct states that a request of the Executive Council may call upon the Conflict of Interest Commissioner to investigate a complaint under code, a request that Premier did not rule out publicly on Thursday. And whereas the government has steadfastly claimed that there has been no wrongdoing on the part of the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture, therefore it be it resolved that all members of the House unanimously endorse this resolution, thereby requesting the Executive Council to call upon the Conflict of Interest Commissioner to investigate the complaint under the code. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
No. There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? No. I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The honourable member for Argyll.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the 4th annual Creative Nova Scotia Gala Awards was held in Tuscot in the beautiful constituency of Argyll on Saturday, and whereas the event hosted by the Nova Scotia Arts and Culture Partnership showcased both veteran and up-and-coming artists, and whereas a key highlight of the event was the presentation of the 2009 Portia White Prize, which was presented to well-known actor, director, playwright, and founder of Eastern Front and Ships Company Theatres, Mary Vingo of Dartmouth. Therefore, be it resolved, all members of this House join me in congratulating Mary on winning the 2009 Portia White Prize, but also to all local organizers in the Tuscot area, which made this gala to such an overwhelming success. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hereby give notice, and on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas pancreatic research remains one of the lowest research funded cancers, with less than 1% of research funds available to Canadian researchers, even though 3,800 Canadians are diagnosed each year with pancreatic cancer, and 3,700 of which will not survive. And whereas Craig's Cause, a Pancreatic Cancer Society, was founded by Stephanie Condon in memory of her dad, Craig Skirman Condon, who passed away 3 years ago, only 8 weeks after being diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And whereas Craig's Cause is one of the 2 organizations in Canada providing research grants to Canadian researchers and providing current information, education, awareness, and support to pancreatic cancer patients. Therefore, it be it resolved that all members of the House of Assembly acknowledge the tremendous effort of Stephanie and her team of volunteers, not only for the organization of the inspirational The Last Lecture Luncheon held on Thursday, October 22, 2009, but also for all of their fundraising efforts, which total more than $160,000 for pancreatic cancer research here in Halifax. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the rich history of Knox Presbyterian Church, Ross Ferry, began on October 30th, 1887, when Big Bedore contractor Bill Old completed construction at a cost of $3,300 to allow the building to open its doors for the first time. And whereas the church hosted the 122nd anniversary service on Sunday, October 25th, and whereas the church continues to have good community outreach to serve whoever is in their community, not just whoever is in church. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this Legislative Assembly congratulate Knox Presbyterian Church of Ross Ferry on their 122nd anniversary, thank them for their continuing community outreach, and wish them the very best in future years. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Affirmative Industries has built a 10-unit residence on Lakecrest Drive in Dartmouth for Nova Scotians successfully dealing with the challenges of mental illness and now in the workforce. And whereas the residence was made possible by cooperation between all levels of government, mental health consumers, and the local community, and was the recipient of the 2008 Canadian Institute of Planners Award of Excellence. And whereas on October 23, 2009, the residence was officially named, marking an important milestone in the recognition of the project as a leading Nova Scotia example of housing for mental health consumers. Therefore, be it resolved that members of the House of Assembly congratulate and recognize Affirmative Industries and the Nova Scotia Cooperative Council on the official naming of the building Affirmative House Cooperative Futures. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Hants West.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Minister of Agriculture and Marketing said in this House of Assembly on October 13th that his government had a plan to help Nova Scotia's beef industry. And whereas the Minister of Agriculture and Marketing also said it was his hope to spend some dollars and also his hope to soon announce the plan. And whereas the Minister of Agriculture must be abundantly clear today with Nova Scotia beef producers, who are losing about $200 every time one of their animals goes to market. And also review the comments from beef farmers such as Larry Weatherby, who raises 350 head of cattle near Harmony, Colchester County, who believes the government is doing too much talking while beef farmers continue to lose money. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly demand the Minister of Agriculture step forward with his plan for Nova Scotia beef farmers, so they will finally know when he uses the words hopes to, beef producers will understand he is committed to helping them and not still trying to convince his cabinet colleagues that money should be injected into the industry. Mr. Speaker, I would ask for request of waiver, notice, and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? No. I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Nova Scotia's top 15 employers were selected from applicants to the National Canada's Top 100 Employers competition, as determined by editors at Media Corp Canada, and whereas Clearwater Seafoods Limited Partnership, a deliverer of premium seafood, was selected as one of the province's top 15 employers, and whereas Clearwater was selected because this Bedford company supports ongoing training and education, and it also supports older workers by helping with retirement planning, and it provides a compassionate leave top-up payments for employees caring for family members at home. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House congratulate Clearwater Seafoods Limited Partnership and CEO Colin MacDonald on being named one of Nova Scotia's top 15 employers for 2010, and wish the company, its owners, and its employees every success in their future endeavours. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Cumberland South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, after I read this resolution, I'll be asking for the concurrence of the House to rise for a moment of silence in memory of late the Mayor of Parrsboro, Doug Robinson.
Certainly.
Whereas after a brief battle with leukemia, Parrsboro Mayor Doug Robinson passed away this morning. And whereas Mayor Robinson dedicated many hours and much hard work to the community of Parrsboro as mayor, and also through many volunteer organizations such as the Masonic Lodge, the Royal Canadian Legion, Parrsboro Historical Society, and his church, just to name a few. And whereas Mayor Robinson will be missed by the residents of his community, and especially by his family, who have stood with him throughout his battle with leukemia. Therefore, be resolved all members of the Nova Scotia Legislature pay tribute to Mayor Doug Robinson for all he has done for the province of Nova Scotia and to his family as we keep them in our thoughts and prayers at this time. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and pass without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. Thank you. The honourable member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Digby Fire Department received a new $460,000 fire truck in September, funded by the municipality of Digby, which will carry all their rescue tools, jaws of life, breathing air, generators, and other equipment. And whereas the Digby Fire Department also received a $40,000 grant from the Emergency Measures Organization, which will go towards purchasing equipment like a 15,000-watt generator, radios, laptops for the trucks, and other equipment. Whereas the fire department now has 35 volunteer members and is hoping to attract more volunteers to ride in the new fire truck. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the House of Assembly congratulate the Digby Fire Department on their new fire truck and equipment and wish them well in their recruitment of new volunteers. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Charlie Walker and his wife Kim of the North Side came up with the idea of the Breast Buddies, a new calendar to support breast cancer, and whereas 12 local businessmen from North Sydney and City Mines have bared all to raise money in their new beefcake calendar, and whereas the Walkers are hoping to sell 1,000 calendars in order to reach their goal of $20,000 for the Canadian Breast Cancer Research Foundation CIBC Run for the Cure, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate the efforts of Charlie and Kim Walker, along with the local businessmen who bear it all to bring awareness and raise funds for breast cancer research. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
It's a good
Those
cause.
against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas small business is the cornerstone of business in Nova Scotia, and October 18th to 24th is Small Business Week in Canada. And whereas small businesses employ half of all Nova Scotians and contribute 50% of the province's GDP. And whereas companies located in Nova Scotia have a proven ability to attract and retain the best and brightest from all over the world. Therefore, be it resolved that members of the House of Assembly congratulate the efforts of all Nova Scotia small business owners on their commitment to Nova Scotia and recognize their contributions to strengthening our province's economy and officially recognize Small Business Week 2009. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Bill Ripley has been a member of the Truro District Lions Club for 27 years and is a past president of the club, and whereas his outgoing and friendly nature makes him an asset to the organization, it is his desire to help whatever event is happening that makes him such a valuable volunteer. And whereas Bill has helped with fundraising events, conventions, blood donor clinic, distribution of bingo cards to businesses for sale to customers each week, therefore be it resolved all members of the House extend congratulations to Bill Ripley for his commitment to helping others and for recently being chosen as Volunteer of the Week. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice, passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the long driveway in Clemensville looks to be leading to an ordinary farm, but instead it is a rescue center for more than 30 animals. And whereas Julian and Barbara Graham moved to Clemensville in May of 2005 from Richmond, Virginia, where they started a foundation for abused animals called All God's Creatures. And whereas Julian understands the economy is tough, and because he has the equipment, he has started a new project called The Helping Hand, offering to help people with small projects such as fixing doors and windows, cutting trees, or moving objects, all free of charge. Therefore, be it resolved the members of the House of Assembly recognize Julian Graham and his wife Barbara for their outstanding contributions they are making to the animals, the elderly, and others in need of support in that community. Mr. Speaker, I ask for a waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Hants West.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas former Hants Exhibition Arena manager and Windsor businessman, the late Dick Ridden, was honoured Friday evening in a special pre-game ceremony prior to the Windsor Rolls Nova Scotia Junior B Hockey League season home opener. And whereas Dick passed away earlier this summer after a short illness and was truly missed Friday evening, as it didn't matter whether it was minor hockey, his grandson's hockey games, or the Windsor Rolls hockey, Dick could always be seen somewhere in the rink intently watching the play. And whereas the Windsor Rolls presented Dick's 3 grandsons and the Ridden family with a puck, an engraved picture of Dick on the puck. Therefore be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly recognize individuals such as the late Richard Dick Ridden, who was a genuine community person who loved local hockey while also helping out in the community whatever way he possibly could. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Nova Scotia's top 15 employers were selected from applicants to the National Canada's Top 100 Employers competition, as determined by editors at MediaCorp Canada Incorporated, and whereas Trihedral Engineering Limited of Bedford, which develops software for mission-critical industrial monitoring and control, has been named one of Nova Scotia's top 15 employers, and whereas this industry leader received its award for its generous vacation allotments, and because it extends family and spousal coverage gratis to employees, provides tuition subsidies for courses at outside institutions, and lets employees bring their spouses with them on company-paid business trips, therefore be it resolved that the members of this House congratulate the 47 programmers, engineers, and salespeople at Trihedral on winning this award and wish them much more success in the years to come. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Argyll.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Minister of Health said in this legislature last Wednesday afternoon, October 21st, the DHAs must have accountability to the communities they serve, and that she has made sure. And whereas while the minister may believe this herself, residents who require services in the Digby Neck Health Clinic find it hard to see where the minister is coming from with such a statement, as she continually refuses to step in and find a solution for the vacant nurse practitioner's position. And whereas the NDP talked repeatedly, almost incessantly, during the spring's election campaign about the ensuring that ERs are always open and that all individuals have available health care. Therefore, be it resolved that the Minister of Health begins showing direct leadership, immediately find a nurse practitioner for the 1,500 residents along in Briar Island, so that those residents can go about their daily lives without the constant worry about how long their health center will be without a nurse practitioner. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. Any further notices of motion? Oh, the honourable member for Cumberland South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hereby give notice on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas during a recent election campaign, then leader of the official opposition, Darrell Dexter, stated he would honour commitments made by the previous Tory government. And whereas Nova Scotians need to believe that when someone would aspire to be Premier of this province, it is crucial for that person's credibility and a new government that statements and promises made be kept. And whereas the Premier now needs to step up to the plate and honour commitments made by the previous government, such as the correctional facility in the town of Spring Hill, a long-term care facility in the western portion of Cumberland South, and additional long-term care beds and renovations to the Bayview Memorial Health Centre, along with numerous transportation projects announced by the previous government. Therefore, be resolved, members of the Nova Scotia Legislature encourage the Premier to honour his word as a result of statements made by him during the recent election campaign, so Nova Scotians will know when he makes a statement or commitment, his word is good. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and pass without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Todd Beale of Clayton Park is the president of the Atlantic Canada Geocaching Association, and whereas geocaching is an outdoor scavenger hunting game which uses a GPS receiver to hide and seek geocaches, and whereas the new sport of geocaching is catching on and introducing people to a healthy lifestyle by promoting hiking and orienteering, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Todd Beale and the Atlantic Canada Geocaching Association and wish them well in the future. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. Any further notices of motion? I'll recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, could you call bills for second reading?
Public bills for second reading.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could you call Bill 39, the Uranium Exploration and Mining Prohibition Act?
Bill number 39, the Uranium Exploration and Mining Prohibition Act. I believe, okay, the Honourable Minister of Community Services.
No, but I'm going to read on the... Yeah. Okay. Mr. Speaker, I'm extremely pleased to have this opportunity to speak in support of Bill 39 to legislate the ban on uranium mining. It has been a long fight for Nova Scotians in their efforts to ban the mining of uranium. In the late 1970s, exploration was permitted, and the action of some prospectors by trespassing and damaging rural properties led to public outcry. This occurred especially in Hants and Lunenburg counties. Mr. Speaker, one particular community under the watchful eyes of mining companies was the community of New Ross, which is in my constituency of Chester St. Margaret's. Landowners quickly learned that they could not legally stop any mining company from coming on their land to explore for uranium. Therefore, people knew they needed to form a coalition against exploration for uranium. As people came together, they involved experts and became more aware of the environmental and health hazards from uranium mining. The effects of uranium mining are disturbing as it releases radon gas for thousands of years from massive tailing piles from ponds which contain 85% of radioactive elements that are exposed. We cannot think that the dangers are not only isolated in the communities where the mining takes place. The gases travel long distances and cause cancer and birth defects decades later because human bodies store and accumulate the undetectable low level of radiation. It is impossible to contain the leaking of radioactive water, so eventually the tailing ponds leak or spill. When these ponds spill, the contaminated water courses through the water table for thousands of years. Water courses travel for miles, spreading the contamination to many communities. Mr. Speaker, it took 12 years of dedication and persistence from individuals and organized groups until the government took action. Public pressure pushed the Progressive Conservative government to establish a uranium inquiry in 1982, headed by Judge Robert McLeave. The inquiry was set up into 3 phases. Phase 1 was overwhelmed with public input. There were 242 briefings presented at 44 public hearings. 211 opposed the uranium mining, 26 favored it, and 5 were neutral. The inquiry was suspended after 87% of the organizations, including the Medical Society, now known as Doctors of Nova Scotia, testified along with the hundreds of other individuals against uranium mining. Based on Judge McLeave's recommendation, He endorsed the moratorium that was actually put in place in 1981. The moratorium was extended for another 5 years in 1990. The moratorium was never officially renewed in 1995, but a tenuous de facto ban on uranium exploration has been in place ever since. For those fighting the uranium battle over the years, that was not enough, because with the stroke of a pen, a government cabinet could lift the moratorium. Mr. Speaker, that is why it is necessary to legally ban uranium mining and finally get rid of the dark cloud of uranium mining that has been hanging over the heads of Nova Scotians. An argument that has been put forth to allow uranium mining in our province has been based on helping the economy through employment. This is really a myth, because only multinational mining companies will really benefit financially. They will make money and leave us with radioactive waste and destroy our environment. Who will end up paying for cleaning up the waste? The taxpayers, because the Canadian government heavily subsidizes the uranium nuclear industry. Nova Scotians will pay through taxes and their health, and that is not a fair trade for a limited number of jobs that it creates. I am very proud that it is my government, the NDP government, that is taking the stand on this issue and making environmental history. Mr. Speaker, reaching this point in creating history is the result of dedicated persistence and hard work by many organizations and individuals. Such groups as the Social Council of Canadians, Sierra Club of Canada Atlantic, the Ecology Action Centre, and Friends of Nature. I am extremely proud of the fact that the original battle against uranium mining was initiated by residents from my constituency of Chester St. Margaret's, Mr. Martin Rudy Hawsey from Chester and Mrs. B. Larder from New Ross. Mr. Hawsey, who many know as he is a renowned environmentalist, called me with excitement and appreciation the day that he heard that the government was presenting this bill, and that a lifelong dream of his will finally be fulfilled. Mr. Speaker, there are other Nova Scotians that deserve recognition for continually advocating for the ban on uranium mining. I wish to thank them and express my appreciation for making politicians aware of its environmental and health hazards. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I am honoured to have the opportunity to speak on such an important bill that truly will contribute to a better and safer life for all Nova Scotians. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I'll now recognize the honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm just going to take a couple of minutes. I had intended to wait till third reading to comment, but just a few comments that I wanted to make after listening to the Minister of Community Services speak on the bill. And I think the Minister and I both agree that it is important that this be addressed, although the comments I would make is that, one, this isn't a ban. It actually allows mining up to 100 parts per million, which is more than what the moratorium allowed. And the moratorium actually required encasing of any deposits that were found, and this removes that limitation. So, Mr. Speaker, for the record, the way that this bill is currently worded, it actually is more permissive to uranium mining than the moratorium that this is replacing. Interesting, and so that obviously is some concern, and you know, this is something that I think needs to be looked at and discussed and decide where one goes when it comes to law amendments, because it's important to know what this bill does and doesn't do. And if you compare it to the moratorium is completely restrictive and required encasement. And there was no 100 part per million limit. So as a matter of fact, there are some uranium mines which operate under limits which are less than the 100 parts per million that this actually allows. So that I find kind of intriguing as to why that would be permitted in this bill. Mr. Speaker, I think we're going to probably hear some interesting comments when we get to law amendments from different parties, including some people from the minister's own department who have expressed an interest in speaking on a personal basis. So that ought to be kind of interesting. The fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, it's important that we go. Obviously, I completely agree with the government that this is an important issue and certainly needs to be addressed. There's one other issue, Mr. Speaker, that I would like to see either in this bill or the government come forward with a plan for, and that's identifying where these uranium deposits are. And I'm not sure how the government would feel best to go about that. But, for example, the member for Kings West was telling me a little while ago that, there are outcroppings in his own riding that, are uranium and actually are dangerous in and of themselves, potentially dangerous, I should say, in and of themselves being there, and yet the public doesn't know where these are and they're not identified. The other two elements to that is, of course, in Nova Scotia we have an awful lot of bedrock, and I think we all know that when we see every subdivision or highway that's built is done through blasting. And I'd be interested to know how the government is proposing that we deal with the dangers that are inherent of going through high uranium areas, and then we have them build a highway or a subdivision and they blast the whole thing down right through the uranium, which at the moment isn't covered at all and is allowed, and how the minister would propose to deal with that, and as well where it comes forward in agricultural activities. Again, similar issue because of the kind of geology we have in Nova Scotia. So, Mr. Speaker, I think law amendments is going to be interesting on this bill. Certainly, I understand why the government is bringing forward a bill, and I think there's a lot of merit in looking at it, but I think it's important that we understand what the bill actually says compared to the moratorium, and understand that the way it is currently worded it is actually weaker than the existing moratorium. So I'm unclear whether that was intentional or perhaps unintentional, but if it was unintentional, then probably needs to be cleaned up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, member. I'll now recognize the honourable member for Cape Breton North.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to get up and speak with regard to Bill number 39, having had gone through the experience of mining activity in my own area, and very contentious mining activity. And the one thing that we also know is that sometimes when we have prohibited certain types of activity in this province, like for instance, we in Nova Scotia have legislation on the books that prohibits nuclear energy here in the province. A lot of that at the time, if you look at the history, was to protect the coal industry and coal-fired power generation than it was the nuclear issue and concerns. However, it is on our books, so the reality is, as we know more, as technology moves forward, as people see the merits of certain aspects of energy generation and or the utilization of a resource, it is something we have to bear in mind. And as this is considered, I do know in my own area on Cape Breton Island, we've seen where strip mining has been extremely contentious versus conventional mining, and I've quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, was supportive of both. I'm on the record as being that, but the difference being was there was a plan about looking at how our resource development and the utilization of near-surface coal resource could be used at a time of where it could support the railway, where it could also support Nova Scotia Power and getting domestic coal, but the longer-term objective, of course, was realizing the Donkin mine and the interests that have come forward. And I know those corporate interests would extend into the Sydney coal field. However, I will note that some of the issues around strip mining haven't been necessarily some of the mining practice, but the corporate practices of individuals that have been involved with the industry who have done a great discredit to their industry. And I've seen and witnessed in my own region, within my own constituency, two simultaneous strip mining operations or proposals that came forward, one highly contentious, very vocally opposed, and another that had little or no public outcry and or during course of mining concerns directly in the village of Florence itself versus, as we know, over in Point of Coney, the Pioneer Coal project there, and there was other applications. The point being is that you have to respect. I remember going over to Port Morion and the community meeting there with a few hundred people, and when you're the energy minister of the day trying to defend this with a company that basically has let you and the community down, you can't defend the defenseless when they haven't done due process, where intimidating people and going around the system can't be tolerated. And the people sought a resolve, and I know my honourable colleague for Cape Breton West, as well as my colleague for Victoria the Lakes, have shared a common position and concern on that. But I also know, and I respect it and I appreciate it, because at the time that should not have been approved and wasn't. And there's no desire to have strip mining in those communities because of the experience that they had. Even though, when we looked at it, Mr. Speaker, about the benefits of remediating old mine workings, being able to clean them up in a modern context, because our regulations and the environmental processes today are much different. But I do respect what the decision of the community was. Part of the issue in Point of Coney was dealing with an uncertain process, and we had people in that looked at what was happening in and around the Stellarton area and the new generation of mining activity and what that meant. So as we go forward, I have an appreciation of what these types of legislation represent. I know my colleague, the member from Hants West, introduced a private member's bill here with regards to prohibiting uranium exploration in his specific area and leading the charge. And I might disagree with the Honourable Minister of Community Services. It isn't an NDP-only initiative. It really was something that was echoed by a colleague here. But we also have to recognize, and the member for Hants West was leading the way for his community on what they deemed to be. But the member at the time also recognized that from the mining industry, we are a resource-based province. We are dependent. And one of the things when I look at any of these types of legislation is say, where are we when it comes to our economy? Where are we when we look at when you prohibit something, does it potentially send a message for those that otherwise would invest and do legitimate good development here? And not to take away in any way, shape or form the concerns that have been raised by individuals in the province. But more importantly, Mr. Speaker, is through the law amendment process as this moves forward, it's up to the industry to commit. The mining industry to have their perspective. I do know in Canada, the uranium mining sector has some very good success stories of effective stewardship of mining work and do it very, very well. And at the same time, there are concerns, and I think the Minister of Natural Resources has brought this forward reflective of the types of concerns and the impact, and has probably weighed it out as what the real economic value versus the potential societal impacts. And so the one thing that I've said is in no way trying to hold up this bill, but definitely want to make sure that through law amendments, which is unique for Nova Scotia, that the industry and or other people can come and have their say. I'm sure there will be individuals coming to herald this legislation and thank the government and want the members of law amendments to bring it back to the chamber. But at the same time, I think it's also fair that the industry be heard. We will listen to it. Are there other aspects about the regulations or other sub-tier, as the member for Dartmouth East has indicated? If there are other residual activities, what will that mean, and the utilization of the resource and the management of it as well. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I just would recognize that this is not an easy topic. Having weathered a very visceral process myself, but more importantly is about standing up. Once you do it, you have to stay the course. And what I'm proud of in Nova Scotia is we have improved our laws and our regulations, that those that are going to mine for a resource are going to have to do it as good stewards, not just of industry, but of the environment, and recognize that any type of development resource-wise has an impact. And we do know people can do things better. There is a new expectation. The bar has been raised, and I believe our society will be better for it. So I look forward to the comments that come forward. I'm sure the Minister of Natural Resources has heard clearly from individuals. And with that, Mr. Speaker, with no intent to hold this up, but to make sure everyone's had their say on this matter. And I thank the members for their indulgence.
Thank you, member. If I recognize the Honourable Minister of Natural Resources, it will be to close debate on the bill. The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank all the members who've contributed to this debate. A couple points that I do want to make. I referred to Justice McLeav's inquiry back in 82-83. That wasn't the final say, I guess, as much as I can go there. More recently, the government of Nova Scotia had two public consultations on which uranium was discussed. The energy strategy consultations in late 2007 and the natural resources strategy in 2008. These two consultations were not designed to be uranium consultations, but they were an opportunity for which the public made use of them to still let it be known what their ideas were around uranium mining. And I want to make the point that they were very clear in their opposition to uranium mining. I can't let the member for Cape Breton North, although I always say that he does have a gift to gab. Well, I said a gift, but I can't let him get away with allowing him to say that the member for Hants West took the lead on this. These are members of a government that was in place for 10 years, and to think that the member from Hants West introduced a bill days ahead of us, and actually my colleague, the present Minister of Finance, introduced a bill in 2007 which actually affected the whole province, or would have affected the whole province, but at least the writing of the bill was for the province of Nova Scotia, not for one particular constituency. I want to address the issues raised by the member for Dartmouth East. Reasonable concerns. What I want him to know is that you can't mine uranium. You can find it. The 100 parts per million is the limit above which you cannot go. In other words, when you're mining for other things or exploring for other things, you can't explore for uranium. You can't mine uranium. But when you're exploring and mining other minerals or metals, then as long as that body of which you extract does not have uranium above the 100 parts per million, then you can extract the other substances. But you can't extract uranium. You cannot mine uranium under this legislation. That was a concern for the Mining Association, that exploration that found uranium in their cores would have to be sealed, and they couldn't continue to explore, and they couldn't mine. But in this legislation would at least allow them to explore for other minerals and to possibly mine them, as long as they don't go above that limit for uranium. But the uranium has to stay. You can't mine it. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the comments of all the members, and I look forward as well to what comments will come forward in the law amendments process, and am pleased to move second reading of Bill 39.
Thank you, Minister. The question then is for second reading on Bill 39. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried.
Bill 39, entitled An Act to Prohibit Uranium Exploration and Uranium Mining in Nova Scotia.
Order this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to call public bills for second reading. Bill number 24, the Pipeline Act.
Bill number 24, the Pipeline Act. The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's with great delight that I take the next few moments to make some comments on Bill number 24, an act to amend Chapter 345 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Pipeline Act. Before I speak with some detail, I should explain that this bill will simply allow us to introduce and publicly consult around new regulations in the future. That is key that we understand that from the start, and I urge members opposite, as we have this bill proceed through the House and over to law amendments, to contact appropriate staff at Energy. They will be available during the law amendments process. But again, I explained that this bill will simply allow us to introduce and publicly consult around new regulations in the future. The proposed amendment before the House today does not change pipeline regulations in any way. Pipeline regulations in any way will not be changed, I repeat. It simply allows us to change them at a future date. I can assure you any draft regulations go through a public consultation before any changes are made. As is the case with any good legislation, public consultation plays a key role in such legislation. So why are we making these changes? The Department of Energy hired a consulting team to take a look at our legislation and regulations and make sure that they were up to date with best practices around the country. Some comparative study on such important pieces of legislation and regulation is always a win-win for all involved. Our existing Pipeline Act was drafted in 1989. We wanted to bring our oversight in line with other jurisdictions, and we wanted to give the UARB the proper tools to do its job. Currently, the board's only clout, its only stick, if I can use that terminology, is to shut down a pipeline when there's a problem. The changes to the Pipeline Act would, and I list them here, the changes to the Pipeline Act would include give the board broader power and flexibility. It would clarify the obligations for companies that operate pipelines. It would also ensure our legislation remains tied to the most up-to-date safety standards and allows for innovation as technology changes. But I'm speaking about future regulations, Mr. Speaker. For now, the bill before us will simply allow us to design that regulation and put it through a public consultation process. Energy staff looks forward to being available to all members of the House, opposition members on this particular piece of legislation. This amendment is comparable to turning the first sod before the real work begins. And with those few comments, I encourage members opposite to participate on this debate on changes to the Pipeline Act. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. I'll now recognize the honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Minister for his comments on this. And the Pipeline Act goes back to 1989, and so it seems appropriate that we would now see some changes. And I always kind of have to laugh every time the government stands up. It's a consultant that's come up with them, and that's almost the first thing the Minister said. But the fact is, I think these do need some changes. This is an act where really, in all honesty, Mr. Speaker, the devil will be in the details and will be in the regulations that come forward. And I note that the Minister has suggested that the draft regulations will be expected to be shared for public comment in the spring if these amendments are passed. So I'm hoping that while obviously the legislature will not necessarily get to vote on the regulations, that the Minister will be open to commentary from members of the opposition on those regulations when they go for public comment, because I don't think at this point I can see what happens in law amendments, but at this point I can't see any major issues with the amendments as proposed. As I say, the devil is in the details when it comes to the regulations. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honourable member. I'll now recognize the honourable member for Cape Breton North.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I too am pleased to rise with regards to Bill number 24. The Minister is aware that we would have been working as a previous government with regards to this, and as he talked about, it has a history from 1989, and from time to time, of course, any of these regulating matters have to be reviewed. They have to be taken into consideration. And on that, I'm very supportive of this bill and want to see it move through. And through you and to the Minister, I appreciate his willingness to have a consult with his staff on this matter as we go to law amendments. on some of the technical aspects, because I recall when it came forward before as a draft piece of legislation, the one item not into any of the regulatory aspects with concern, it really came down to the Governor and Council and ministerial authority. And the minister may have had this as part of this process where there was some discussion and recommendation brought forward on the expropriation authority, that it should be removed from the minister and the Governor and Council and transferred to the UARB. And I recall at the time I was vehemently opposed to anything that would not only go down a road, that it would move away from a precedence and the authority of the Governor and Council when it came to expropriations. And the other thing with this, Mr. Speaker, that came in was dealing with not only the expropriation authority, but also transferring to the UARB the ability to decide on compensation with regards to an expropriation, which again would be setting a precedent that I believed would not be a good one. What is truly an authority that should rest and lie within the Governor and Council. It is something Cabinet has to look at and the Minister has to deal with. Now, the other thing that came up as part of this recommendation was really to take away that decision-making because of a potential conflict of the minister being the person to enforce and to do oversight. And it wasn't held. And so with the minister, I'll be looking to, between now and law amendments, just to confirm that he, and I say, I believe the minister should maintain that authority. The minister should have that oversight, and that Cabinet, through the Governor and Council, should be making and maintaining the maintenance of those types of decision-making, and that it not get watered down. And in some ways, Mr. Speaker, it may have seemed to be convenient to move it over to the board, but I do believe it would have opened the door for other precedents with regards to expropriations that would not be appropriate. So that's really, Minister, where my concern with this bill, and as we analyze it, and I know you've already offered to consult with your staff, and I thank you for that, but that's the point I'll be looking to have clarified as we go to law amendments. But otherwise, Mr. Speaker, I want to compliment the Minister and the Government for bringing forward this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Member. If I recognize the Honourable Minister of Energy, it will be to close debate. The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Excuse me as I remove that hulls from my mouth. Take the hulls out of your mouth before you speak publicly. That's what I say to my students. I thank the member from Dartmouth East and the member from Cape Breton North for their comments. And I can assure you, as the process goes through, we will make sure that staff is available for all of those types of questions, but for the specific one the member from Cape Breton North introduced. Again, I thank you for your interventions, and I look forward to this bill being go through our process in the House and go to law amendments. Those comments I would move second reading.
The question is for second reading on Bill 24. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried.
Bill 24, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 345 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Pipeline Act.
Order this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, could you call private local bills for second reading?
Private and local bills for second reading.
Could you call Bill 45, the Canning Library and Heritage Centre Exemption Act?
Bill number 45, the Canning Library and Heritage Centre Exemption Act. The Honourable Member for Kings North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy to rise this afternoon to speak about this bill. And I'd just like to give a little bit of background about why we're here to speak about this. In the early 1990s, a group of citizens in the Canning area who became known as the Canning Library and Heritage Centre Association began to raise funds for the delivery of a heritage and library service in their community. And they were doing a great job and raised a considerable amount of money, but at that time weren't incorporated. And so in a collaborative way, the village of Canning and the commissioners who make up the village agreed to take responsibility for the purchase of the property that has since become an active part of community life in Canning. And For the interest of the members of this House, Mr. Speaker, the Canning Library and Heritage Centre Association houses a number of important programs to that community. It has a library which operates independently, which has 1,600 card-holding members who can borrow books from both Canning and surrounding communities. It houses the kind of organizational activities of what's known as the Fieldwood Heritage Society, and contains a heritage museum on the second floor above the library itself. There's a Wilf Carter Center, which is has memorabilia and is dedicated to the memory of the music of Wilf Carter. And in fact, one of the ways that the Society raises funds is to hold regularly Wilf Carter concerts in that community, which draw people from far and wide, in fact, all over the world. The Society has, using that facility, has also done a number of other projects. One has been to restore a Canning lighthouse on the banks of the Canard River, which was once a shipping harbor. And many people have become involved in that project, senior citizens and students in local junior and senior high schools. And in the future, the Society has an interest in renovating a heritage home which is located across the street from the particular building we're talking about. But, Mr. Speaker, the issue at hand is that in 1993, because the Heritage Society was not incorporated, the village of Canning purchased the building with full intent to turn the responsibility of ownership back to the Society at an appropriate time. And it was determined that one of those times would be when the association was financially capable of accepting that responsibility and when it was actually incorporated. And the Canning Library and Heritage Centre Association was incorporated, in fact, on May 30th, 1996. So this decision is perhaps overdue. I think overall, Mr. Speaker, this is a bill which is a story about collaboration and partnership. It's a story about the responsible stewardship of the Heritage Association. And it's a story about the development in one part of Nova Scotia of historical memory and of creating an interesting tourism opportunity for citizens who come to our province. So I don't think I need to say more other than that we need this bill to actually enable the Society to take ownership of this building. The Municipal Government Act, Mr. Speaker, as it's currently worded, does not allow for the transfer of ownership, so an exception is required, and that's what this bill is about. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I'll take my place and look forward to seeing this project move forward.
Thank you, member. I'll now recognize the honourable member for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for the explanation. As we in the Liberal caucus understand Bill number 45, it in effect exempts the Canning Library and Heritage Centre from Section 446 of the Municipal Government Act. Indeed, I would caution the member, though this is a private member's bill, so you may want to work on your own caucus over there, because private members' bills don't have a good history of going through the House of Assembly and the legislature, so I'm sure you've done your lobbying effort. And I would also say that I'm not making this part of the contingent on our support here, Mr. Speaker, but he might also want to check if the library in Canning has a copy of my book. As I said, that's not part of the deal to get our support here, But no, certainly we in the Liberal caucus here would be willing to lend our support to the member and his private member's bill. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much.
Thank you, member. I'll now recognize the honourable member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I too just want to take a moment and commend the honourable member for raising and bringing this bill forward. And it's important that we work with historical societies, and the nature of this bill, and certainly with our community stakeholders and so on that are affected by this. So just a couple of very short minutes and comments I wanted to get on the record in support of this bill for a good Valley community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member. If I recognize the honourable member from Kings North, it will be to close debate on Bill 45. The honourable member for Kings North.
I would move that we close debate on Bill 45 and act to enable the Village of Canning to transfer certain lands to the Canning Library and Heritage Centre Association.
So you're moving second reading?
I'm moving second reading.
Okay. The question then is for second reading of Bill 45. Are you ready for the question? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried.
Bill 45, entitled an act to enable the Village of Canning to transfer certain land to the Canning Library and Heritage Centre Association.
Order this bill be referred to the Committee on Private and Local Bills. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, would you now go to government notice of motion, address and reply from the speech from the throne?
Address and reply to the speech from the throne. The Honourable Member for Lunenburg West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my distinct pleasure to rise in my place and respond to the speech from the throne delivered by Her Honour in this House on the 17th of September. Before doing so, however, I would be remiss if I did not offer my most heartfelt thanks to the constituents of Lunenburg West. It is these folks who put me here, and I am most appreciative for the trust they've placed in me and the support that they've accorded me. Mr. Speaker, Lunenburg West has been a riding that has consistently been held by either progressive conservative or liberal members throughout its history. In the June 9, 2000 election, that pattern ended and history was made when I became the first New Democratic Party member ever elected in this riding. This didn't happen by accident, Mr. Speaker. The people voted for change, and change they will get. And they're already seeing some of that now, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my purpose, or purposes, I guess, really, this afternoon in this my inaugural speech in this historic chamber are threefold. First, I wish to pay tribute to some very special family members and friends who've had a profound influence on my life over these many years. Secondly, I'd like to present the honourable members with a vignette or a small picture of the place from which I come and the people whom I represent. And thirdly, I'd like to explain why I'm here and what I hope to accomplish during my tenure. If in some small measure I accomplish any of these things, I'll consider that I've achieved at least a measure of success. A good number of people contributed to my electoral win, and I'd be remiss if I did not acknowledge the significant contribution that they made. I'd like to thank my campaign manager, Gord Landrio, as well as my official agent, Jeff Brett, and the dedicated group of men and women who formed the core of my campaign team. I'd like to recognize the selfless contribution of Murray Manzer, sadly no longer with us, who toiled tirelessly for the NDP all his life and was a very strong supporter. But other key members of my team included his wife, Mary Isabel Terry, Don and Janet Calhoun, Wolfgang and Brenda Zemer, Lloyd Knott and his wife Linda, Angela Conrad, Letha Haysom, James Horseman, Tiffany Murray, Greg Boyd, Jason Dory, Jennifer Fancy, Margaret Parsons, Jim Welly, Janet Clark, Judy Wynott, Russell Miller, Dean White, Sylvia Lonergan, Stan Stevens, I got a lot here, Harry Covert, Ralph Damone, Marjorie Damone, Brian Wenzel, Joanne Cook, Dave March, and many others. The voters list of Lunenburg County. I'm very proud that these dedicated men and women represent a variety of age, gender, and ethnic groups, and I'm equally proud of how they all work together to help elect a government that has as its focus the most important social unit in the world, the family. I also feel it is very important, at least for me personally, to pay tribute to a deceased friend, mentor, and relative, George Krause, QC. George was educated in the same one-room school that I attended for the first 6 grades of my schooling in Crouchtown, a village about 16 kilometers southwest of Bridgewater. And in the late 1920s, he attended Dalhousie University, and after winning the Langdell Scholarship, he went on to study law at Harvard, from which he graduated in 1933 with a Master's of Law degree. Now, for a short period of time, he became a law professor at Dalhousie, but he longed for the country life, like many of us do, myself included, and so he returned to the South Shore and opened a law practice in Bridgewater. Before long, though, he ran for town councillor and he was elected, and then later was elected mayor, in which capacity he served for 11 years. But George was always a staunch supporter of the CCF in the early years, and in later years an advocate for the NDP. And he was, unfortunately for me, very old when I was very young. He had a love of language and a sharp sense of humor, and my earliest recollections of him have him sitting in his garden regaling me with his versions of nursery rhymes. And I mean, there is a point to this, but he used to do Hickory Dickory Dock, the rodent ascended the chronometer. That was one of them. Or his version of Three Blind Mice, Three Incapacitated Rodents. But from him, as silly as that may sound, I learned to have a love of and a respect for the power of language. I learned from him that words can be a transforming medium for good or evil. And I learned that the adage, sticks and stones can break your bones, but words can never hurt you, is a travesty. Of course they can, and they do, and that's why it's so important to speak in a measured way. In any event, George was a character never to be forgotten. He was an intellectually astute individual with a wide variety of interests, but his most outstanding quality, as far as I'm concerned, was his wisdom. He had the ability to spin an extremely good yarn to illustrate any point he wanted to make. For instance, he once told me that 2 of the worst things that ever happened to folks on the South Shore related to the phasing out of the up-and-down sawmill from logging operations and the demise of the ox team as a means of transport. Mr. Speaker, as some in this House may know, the up-and-down sawmill was a common sight in many communities in my region in bygone days, and no doubt in many of the members opposite as well. It was powered by water, so what happened was the saw went up and down rather than in a rotary motion, and you could literally light a pipe and lean on the log for some time while it worked its way slowly forward to be sawn. And similarly, anyone, and I think most of you have seen this, anyone who's seen an ox team in action know that speed is not associated with this breed. George, tongue-in-cheek, but with the core of seriousness, would argue something like the following. This could explain how I ended up the way I am, I don't know. George, so what he would do is he would say something like this: to think well, it is important for one to have time for reflection. Reflection is necessary if wisdom is to be attained. And then he would argue that contemporary lifestyles, with multitasking and fast-paced schedules, force one to rush about too much, which stifles reflection, therefore preventing an individual with such a lifestyle from attaining wisdom. So when teaming oxen on trips out of the woods, at the end of the day or while waiting for a log to slowly make its way through the up and down sawmill, it was possible for one to have time to listen to the rushing water, or this time of year observe the changing foliage, ruminate on love of one's family, or solve problems big or small. These artifacts from our bygone days, caused us to slow down, which fostered reflective thought, which subsequently led to the attainment of wisdom. Mr. Speaker, to this day, it's my belief that in this homespun philosophy, George definitely had a point. When I was a teenager, he predicted that one day I would sit in this House as a member of the NDP, even though, yes, at the time, nothing could have been farther from my juvenile mind. So George was a scholar, a teacher, a lawyer, but more importantly, a gentleman who definitely fought for justice and equality. His favorite quote, which he oftentimes cited, came from Jean Jaurès, the great French social democrat, and was the following: "Take from the altars of the past the fire, not the ashes." He felt that quote best summed up how we felt about democratic socialism. Well, George, okay, you were a huge influence on my life, and I made it, and I couldn't be happier that your prediction came true. As George's dear wife, Loie, is also no longer with us, I'd like to convey my warmest regards to his daughter and son-in-law, Angela and Dave Church, back in Bridgewater, and acknowledge George's grassroots philosophy and powers of prediction. Perhaps, based on what happened, I should add clairvoyant to that list as well. I don't know. Mr. Speaker, all members of this House know that a fine intellect or strength of character, although great attributes in their own right, are not sufficient in and of themselves to propel one into this House, but that in addition to a number of important cognitive and personality traits, takes hard work, an organized team, and many dedicated folks behind the scenes to make it happen. And so, Mr. Speaker, today I thank them for their hard work, their support, and their wise counsel. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank my wife, Debbie, for her abiding love and support for the past 32 years, and in particular for her tolerance, as I and you're already, everybody's starting to appreciate that, for her tolerance as I enter this new and hectic phase of my life. And I also want to thank my sons Stephen and James for being not only supportive and loving toward their mother and me at all times, and particularly as we pursue these new challenges, but for the social consciousness and the genuine love and respect that they show toward everyone that they encounter. It's these traits of their characters about which I am truly the most proud. My older sister, Pat, not much older in case she's watching or listening to this, was always a strong supporter of every positive endeavor in which I have been engaged over the years, as well as fairly harsh critic when she felt I was moving in the wrong direction, particularly in my formative years. So I appreciate her efforts for helping to keep me on the straight and narrow so I could arrive at this place where I am today. And then, work in progress. Finally, from a family perspective, I wish to thank my parents, Anita and Bill, sadly now deceased, and I'd like to acknowledge the love and support of my mother-in-law, the now matriarch of our family, Agnes Northover. Agnes, who's 91 and was born in Saskatchewan on the prairies in a place that had no name. Her birth certificate just has latitude and longitude coordinates. Seriously. The daughter of immigrant parents from Austria-Hungary, she knows well the struggle of families coming to a new land, fleeing persecution in a foreign land. Hailing from the West, she is also fully aware of the accomplishments of great men like C.S. Woodworth and Tommy Douglas, Stanley Knowles, A.A. Heap, and how they contributed to building the social fabric not only in Saskatchewan, but also in Canada as well. Aside from providing me with my wife of these many years, she also attended every major event during my campaign and has been at the Kennard Centre, in the Red Room, in the gallery, at all the ceremonies related to the investiture of this current administration. So I salute her and her late husband, Jim, who've been a second pair of parents to me. Thank you. They've been a second pair of parents to me for these many years. Mr. Speaker, I'd also like to thank Her Honour for all the very good work she does in serving Nova Scotians in her official capacity as Lieutenant Governor of this beautiful province. And I'd like to offer my congratulations too to you, Mr. Speaker, to the Deputy Speakers and all members on both sides of this House. It is my hope as a new member of this august institution that this session of the Legislative Assembly will be a productive and collegial one, and that much good work will be accomplished for the benefit of all Nova Scotians. I consider it a great honor and privilege to be a member of this House, an honor not accorded many, as was noted some days ago earlier on by the member from Cumberland South. And of course, as I have already stated, I would not be here without the support and trust of my constituents. So with that in mind, I guess I'd like to tell you next a bit about the constituency of Lunenburg West and its people. Mr. Speaker, Lunenburg West is a sprawling riding on the South Shore, which aside from the town of Bridgewater is essentially a rural riding. It includes for the most part all of Lunenburg County to the west of the LaHave River, so hence its moniker. Its boundaries are the LaHave River to the east, the Atlantic Ocean to the south, the constituency of Queens to the west, and the constituency of Annapolis to the north. Some 20,000 folks live in the riding, with the greatest concentration of population in the town of Bridgewater. Mr. Speaker, it is agreed by many in the province that the town of Bridgewater is a town on the move. With a population of about 7,600 and growing, the town's anchored by a large Michelin tire plant employing 1,300 workers approximately from Bridgewater and the surrounding communities. It has also become a business centre for the South Shore, drawing many folks from communities up and down the coast, well beyond the boundaries of the riding. Mr. Speaker, Bridgewater is an educational centre with 2 large high schools, Bridgewater Junior Senior High and Parkview Education Centre, a large elementary school, and a campus of the Nova Scotia Community College. Former graduates from the area schools like Donald Sutherland and Alan Blakeney have gone on to distinguish themselves in fields as diverse as acting and politics. Of course, there have been many more covering a wide variety of vocations and occupations, but time does not permit an exhaustive list here. Also in the riding are 3 very good elementary schools, Pence, Hebville, and Newcomville. These schools feed Hebville Academy, a middle school, which in turn feeds Parkview Education Centre, one of the high schools. The area schools are top-notch, Mr. Speaker, and those in the region accord them high praise. The town is also home to the Michael Baker Justice Centre. Mr. Speaker, on the 17th, in her response to the speech from the throne, my colleague from Lunenburg spoke of the significant contribution the Honourable Michael Baker has made to the people of Lunenburg County and in a broader context to the people of this province. I, too, would like to acknowledge Mr. Baker's record of public service to all Nova Scotians and offer my best wishes and warmest regards to his family. The state-of-the-art Justice Centre, named in his honour and officially opened in July of this year, makes the town a centre for jurisprudence on the South Shore as well. Bridgewater is also home to the South Shore Regional Hospital, making it a regional health centre. The dedicated doctors and nurses who serve at the South Shore Regional Hospital daily earn my admiration and respect. As Ministerial Assistant to the Honourable Maureen MacDonald, I look forward to working with medical staff to make health care in my region work. The appointment of Dr. John Ross as Emergency Room Advisor, the Patient Access Registry for Nova Scotia, the 811 call-in helpline to acquire diagnostic information are but 3 of the many important initiatives already taken by my government to benefit not only my constituents, but all Nova Scotians. There are also some fine long-term care homes in the region like Hillside Pines and Cook Villa, which provide excellent long-term care for our aging population. As well, there are a number of comfortable seniors apartment complexes like Drumlin Hills and Ridgewood, and currently Shanex is constructing a major facility in the area as well. Mr. Speaker, the town of Bridgewater is also home to a number of regional government departments and is the commercial and retail centre of the South Shore. It's not unusual these days to see construction cranes at many locations around the town, and folks who've been away for a decade or so who return to the area to meet old friends and renew acquaintances never fail to be amazed by the meteoric growth of this South Shore town. Mr. Speaker, Bridgewater is home to Branch 24 of the Royal Canadian Legion, of which I am a proud member, as was my father before me. Branch 24 recently hosted the 60th reunion of the West Nova Scotia Regiment, an occasion that was marked by a resolution that I put forward in this House on the 18th of September, and which was supported by all members, for which I am truly grateful. The West Nova Scotia Regiment has a proud tradition in the Canadian military. The only year the South Shore exhibition was not held during its proud history was in 1939, when the exhibition grounds in the town were commandeered to muster the regiment for its overseas campaigns, in which its members served with distinction. My father served with this regiment in both World Wars, as a Vickers machine gunner in the First World War and in the Air Force in the Second. He will always be my hero, and I honour all veterans in my riding and across this province who sacrifice so much so we can enjoy our freedom. And I think, Mr. Speaker, it's particularly poignant on this day when Mr. Nash and his comrades came here to present us with poppies. A very significant day for me, and I'm really pleased that I'm able to speak today. As I mentioned, Bridgewater is home to the South Shore Exhibition, one of the oldest and perhaps one of the most famous agricultural fairs of the province. The fair has been running annually without interruption, except 1939, since 1891. Many folks travel great distances each year to enjoy this agricultural showcase. This year's edition broke all previous one-day attendance records when 12,184 people passed through the turnstiles in one day. So I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate Ms. June Hanrahan, President of the South Shore Exhibition, her 13-member board, and her staff for all the hard work they did to make that happen. The Big X. In summer, the farmers market is a place of bustling activity in the town centre on Saturday mornings. I'm pleased to support this market, which showcases locally grown food produced in the outlying communities. Those who operate and run the market are to be congratulated for a job well done. It's yet another fine example of how we can grow and support our local economy. Mr. Speaker, we're blessed in our community to have the Bridgewater Fire Department, a highly skilled group of volunteers who provide fire service to a very high standard, and they're extremely talented and musically adept band which performs in a highly professional manner and can be seen and heard at just about every community event in the area. As a musician myself who understands the intricacies of orchestral playing, I have the highest admiration and respect for their professionalism and greatly appreciate their service as an integral part of the community. In the communities surrounding the town, there are also 12 community fire departments which supply excellent fire services to the citizens of the region. They include departments in Chelsea, Hebbs Cross, Hebbville, Hempford, Italy Cross, LaHave, Lapland, Midville Branch, Newcomville, Pleasantville, Conquerall Bank, and Wildville. In addition, there are countless organizations such as the YMCA, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Scouts, Cubs, 4-H, the United Way, and numerous other groups that do excellent work to make our area a better place to live, work, and play. Mr. Speaker, volunteerism is alive and well in Lunenburg West and is one of the fundamental building blocks of the region. Of great interest to many constituents in my riding is the Lunenburg County Lifestyle Centre. We call it the LCLC. This proposed facility, which will consist of two NHL size ice surfaces, a 25-meter, 6-lane pool, a home to the new Bridgewater Library, and additional community and cultural space, constitutes a much-needed component to the recreational options available to the citizens of my riding. As Ministerial Assistant to the Minister of Health, I know and understand the importance of a healthy lifestyle. Part of this government's goal in making health care affordable is to promote healthier lifestyles, thus keeping folks fit and out of our hospitals. It is one of the most important components in our health care plan. A facility like this also makes it easier to attract health care and other professionals to the region. A few days ago, the member from Argyll suggested in this House that backbenchers on this side of the legislature have no say in the conduct of affairs of the current administration. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Mr. Speaker, we have an open caucus where all views are valued and where all opinions are respected. On this side of the House, being on the backbench simply refers to where one physically sits in this House. With regard to the Lunenburg County Lifestyle Centre, I'm proud to say that our government listens to all its members and that this government is financially committed to the construction of this facility, which will benefit all in my riding. It is a partnership between the municipality of Lunenburg, the town of Bridgewater, the Nova Scotia government, and the federal government. Mr. Speaker, for several months we have been waiting for final approval from Ottawa before moving forward. I'm pleased to say that on Friday, October 2nd, that approval was granted, and this $32.7 million project was given the green light. It serves as an example of how all levels of government and politicians of different political stripes can work together to foster change that benefits all. To the honourable member from Yarmouth, who stated in this House recently that South Shore ridings get nothing, I beg to differ. Not only have we just landed one of the biggest projects my riding has seen in some time, Mr. Speaker, but thanks to the Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure, a number of highway paving and improvement projects are currently underway as well in Lunenburg West, bringing much-needed upgrades to our roadways. I'd like to thank the Honourable Minister of Health Promotion and Protection and the Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal, as well as my colleagues in caucus, for hearing me out on these projects and supporting these much-needed improvements in my riding. Rimming the town are a number of beautiful smaller villages and hamlets. Their number is prolific and their names reflect our rich heritage. They include the LaHave Islands, Crescent Beach, West Dublin, Dublin Shore, LaHave, West LaHave, Pleasantville, Mount Pleasant, Conquerall Bank, Conquerall Mills, Krause's Settlement, Lake Center, New Cumberland, Hebbs Cross, Hebbville, Wildville, Newcomville, Chelsea, Baker Settlement, it's coming, West Clifford, East Clifford, Waterloo, Laconia, Lapland, Colpton, Nineveh, Simpsons Corner, Hempford, Branch LaHave, Upper Branch, Lower Branch, Midville Branch, New Canada, Middlewood, Italy Cross, Cookville, Auburndale, and Camperdown. Here we go, Bill. If this sounds a bit like the old Hank Snow tune, I've been everywhere, I make no apologies. You see, Mr. Speaker, the names of these beautiful communities and hamlets have a great deal to say about our heritage. Mr. Speaker, many of my constituents are elderly. Some are disabled, and as you can probably tell from the place names I just outlined from that chronology, many people live in rural areas. Recently, a troubling event occurred in my riding. Canada Post chose to inform many of my constituents that they will no longer be getting mail delivery at mailboxes at the ends of their driveways. The reason given for this change was cited as safety concerns. On hearing of this development on August 12th, I wrote a letter to Ms. Moya Green, CEO of Canada Post Corporation, to get a copy of the safety report for all 4 Atlantic provinces. You see, and I'm going back to my friend George here, you see, my thinking was that if I received the data from these 4 provinces with similar topography and geography, I'd be better able to make a judgment on the efficacy of this policy. Recently, I received the information I requested, and it indicated the major safety incidents occurred in Ontario and the Prairie provinces, causing me to ruminate as to why rural rail boxes in my riding are under attack. Canada Post also chose not to attend a public meeting on this issue held at the Oak Hill Fire Hall on September 9th, which was attended by the MLA for Lunenburg and the MLA for Queens, as well as the Mayor of the Municipality of Lunenburg, representatives of the Postal Union, and myself. There were, by various accounts, about 300 people in attendance at this meeting. Mr. Speaker, it was unanimously agreed by all parties present at that meeting that no change should be made to rural mail delivery in Lunenburg County, of which my constituency, of course, is a part. As I've already noted, many of my constituents are elderly or disabled. Many do not drive, and many do not own or care to own computers. Their connection to commerce, their social interactions, and their connections to family are controlled by mail delivery to a box at the end of a driveway. Any change to this regimen can produce only hardship and sorrow for my constituents. Any change which forces my constituents to receive mail at a group box, or any change forcing residents to travel to the town of Bridgewater to collect their mail, the 2 options that were offered by Canada Post, raises significant safety concerns for my constituents and enlarges the environmental footprint, which members on this side of the House and members like my colleague from Dartmouth East are interested in reducing. Although rural mail delivery is under federal jurisdiction, I raised the matter in this House because if this policy is being pursued in Lunenburg West and other parts of Lunenburg County, and you are a member representing a rural Nova Scotia constituency, it'll soon be coming to a community near you. I believe the member from Cape Breton North has similar concerns. I hope all members of this House will join the honourable member and me in vigorously opposing this ill-conceived policy. Mr. Speaker, the residents of my constituency, thank you, thank you, Gary. Mr. Speaker, the residents of my constituency have a rich and colourful history, as I noted earlier, when I delivered a chronology of some of the names of the villages and hamlets in the riding. The village of LaHave, named after the river that bounds my riding on the east, is the oldest settlement in Canada. Samuel de Champlain, de Razilly, and others sailed into Green Bay in the 1600s and founded the settlement. They built a fortification and named it Sainte Marie de Grace, which is known today as Fort Point. The adjoining settlement came to be known as LaHave after the last visible place these settlers saw when leaving France, which happened to be Cap de la Hève, hence the name to this day. De Razilly was obviously pleased with this newly discovered area because he wrote the following, and this is a quote from de Razilly: "The lakes are filled with all kinds of freshwater fish. The sea is paved with turbot, sturgeon, salmon, and 1,000 other kinds. The heads alone of these fish, although they are thrown away, could feed so many poor people over there," he's referring to his native land, "who are reduced to eating bread made of bracken and acorns," end quote. Champlain and his cohorts eventually moved from LaHave to St. Croix, and after a disastrous winter in this location, on to Port Royal. However, this settlement was actually the capital of New France for a time. As always, some folks remain behind, and this established our French heritage in the area. Surnames indicative of this group include Langell, Pernette, Vino, Legay, and LeBlanc. Of course, Mr. Speaker, the original settlers were the Mi'kmaq. These sturdy folk plied the waterways, including the Lahave River and other rivers and streams in the region, moving from their wintering grounds at Kejimkujik to the summer camps along the coast of my riding. Many of the lakes in and around communities like Chelsea and Lapland and Hebbs Cross have beautiful Mi'kmaq names like Menampkeek, Malipsikat, and Moliga. The Mi'kmaq were excellent stewards of the land and certainly put their stamp on the part of Lunenburg County in which I reside. These First Nations people of Nova Scotia deserve our admiration and respect, and I am pleased that our Premier is establishing policies that acknowledge and promote their best interests in our time. Many of my constituents' ancestors came from countries in what is now the United Kingdom. Place names like West Dublin and Dublin Shore testify to our Irish heritage, while surnames like Bell, Baggett, Bush, Smith, Watson, McLean, McCarthy, and Stewart indicate our English and Scottish heritage. But by far our biggest influx of immigrants, Mr. Speaker, were of German descent. I guess the name of the county is the giveaway there, Lunenburg County. Mr. Speaker, the settlers that founded the beautiful town of Lunenburg in the mid-1700s were largely foreign Protestants, about 2,700 in all, who came from the Upper Rhine. They came from the French and German-speaking Swiss cantons, and from the French-speaking Principality of Montbéliard. And these settlers soon fanned out from there to occupy lands in the surrounding countryside. That legacy today is obvious when reading the phone book and checking the surnames in the Bridgewater and Lahave exchanges. It is filled with names like, of course, Allenbach, Bachman, Beck, Bolivar, Clattenburg, Conrad, Kraus, Degley, Eisenhower, Feindl, Freilich, Himmelmann, Hebb, Herman, Heineck, Jodrey, Kolbach, Knickel, K-N-I-C-K-L-E, Knickel, Meisner, Nogler, Euchel, Publicover, Rafuse, Rodenizer, Schneer, Sloan-White, Wombolt, Wiggle, Wynut, Weil, Zink, and Zwicker. All right, I can do it with place names or I can do it with names of town. Mr. Speaker, the unique blend of English speech or dialect that developed from this melting pot of cultural influences led to what's commonly known as the Lunenburg County twang. Some of us have lost it through travel and living in other places. Many of us thankfully still retain it. This dialect, unique to our area, has led some folks to refer to us as Dutchies. With the deepest respect for the folks from Holland, the term originated from Deutsch, the word for German in that language, so prevalent is this linguistic description of my people that the greatest Canadian bluesman, originally from Lunenburg County, the Prime Minister of the Blues, Dutchie Mason, used it as his stage name throughout his performing career. If there's a blues heaven, Dutchie's there, and his legacy, of course, lives on with his enormously talented son, Garrett. We in Lunenburg County will always claim Dutchie to be our own, and we certainly do not mind being referred to as Dutchies. Mr. Speaker, the heritage I have just outlined is well preserved in a number of fine museums, large and small, in the region. The Desbrizes Museum in Bridgewater is an extensive collection of artifacts and material, while the Deanwell Carding Mill Museum on Victoria Road in Bridgewater and the Fort Point Museum in Lahave give us important glimpses of our developing culture and our rich heritage. Mr. Speaker, we must be ever cognizant of the fact that most of us were the sons and daughters of immigrants. With the exception of the original people, the Mi'kmaq, we have all come from immigrant families. We should always remember this, and especially now that our government embarks on welcoming more immigrants. To build our province and grow our economy, we must provide a warm and nurturing environment to integrate these new arrivals into our society with the generosity of spirit and the kindness of manner for which we are internationally renowned. Mr. Speaker, the founding residents of my constituency helped to build the economy of this province largely by working in the primary resource industries. In the days of woodwind and sail, the economy boomed. Those who populated the coast, mainly fishers, needed material to build their ships and vessels. They would contract with lumbermen and sawmill owners to go into the hinterland and harvest the material needed for the fuddocks, knees, masts, beams, and planking to construct their vessels. The material would be hauled to yards in Conquerall, the Dublins, the Lahave Islands, and other yards where shipwrights would fashion these materials into works of art like our beloved Blue Nose, from which our province is famous. Legend has it that when one of these sawmill owners was looking for a place to construct his mill, he found a significant set of rapids on the Petite River where he knew he could build a flume which would exhilarate the water to run the wheel which would propel his up and down sawmill. He's reputed to have said, "This place conquers them all." And as a result, the place to this day is named Conquer All Mills. Mr. Speaker, the forests have long been kind to the folks in my riding. Indeed, my own father and his brothers were running the Ramey Mill when I was a boy, and it was there that I learned the value of a hard day's work and not to be a whiner. My father believed that if you injured yourself and the body part that you were complaining about was still attached, then there really wasn't an issue. Most of the adults I worked with in those formative years held a similar view, and that it was this sense or spirit of rugged individualism that carried the day even then as it does now. Simply put, in the tradition of John Calvin, it was believed that hard work was a noble calling and would be rewarded in heaven. This tradition still persists today, and so it should come as no surprise, Mr. Speaker, that the Michelin Tire plant in Bridgewater, staffed by workers from my riding, is one of the most productive in the world and a center for testing new technology and innovation for the company. We live by the credo, if it can be done, we'll do it. Mr. Speaker, in winter, many of the constituents in my riding enter the forest to harvest Christmas trees, as they have for generations, earning the county the title Christmas Tree Capital of Canada and bringing millions of dollars into the local economy. It should not be surprising to members of this House, then, that sustainable forestry practices, which our government will implement during its mandate, will be very important to the constituents in my area. As one moves away from the coast and proceeds inland, the topography changes to rolling hills and gentle valleys. It's here on these drumlins, left by the glaciers, where the dairy, beef, and poultry farms that form the base of the agrarian economy are located. Here again, sustainable practices, new markets, and innovative farming methods, including organic farming, are key to growing and sustaining this valuable driver of our local economy. Mr. Speaker, in beautiful inland communities like Chelsea, Baker Settlement, Culpton, Simpsons Corner, Hempford, Camperdown, and New Ellum, rivers, lakes, and streams abound, and the forests teem with wildlife. In the spring and summer, many of my constituents fish for salmon and trout, in more recent years, bass, while in the fall, many hunters take to the woods to hunt deer. For folks who enjoy hiking, snowmobiling, or riding their ATVs, a number of approved trails allow these enthusiasts a wide range of recreational choices. Whether it's an ocean vista, viewed from a beautiful sandy beach, or the solitude of a quiet lake at sunset, Lunenburg West has it all, making it a great place to spend a family vacation. Mr. Speaker, inshore fishing has long been a mainstay of the local economy of Lunenburg West. Fishers from the LaHave Islands, West Dublin, Dublin Shore, and LaHave have long plied the oceans, harvesting both wet fish and lobsters. Policies that support and sustain local fishermen are important to my constituents and are crucial to growing and strengthening this important sector of our local economy. Also in the constituency are a host of small businesses offering services to the residents. These include plumbers, electricians, machinists, carpenters, heating and ventilation companies, landscapers, car dealerships, sawmills, construction companies, realtors, retail outlets, both large and small, restaurants, cleaning companies, building supply dealers, and a host of other businesses that meet the needs of the approximately 20,000 constituents that I outlined before. Perhaps the biggest feature that my riding has going for it is lifestyle. Many of the folks living there from my age group, and there are a significant number who fall into that category, were brought up like me, and so by extrapolation, I guess, have similar values and characteristics. Like me, they were taught for at least a bit of their education in a one-room school. Like me, they were part of an extended family. Most in the early years attended Sunday school and later church. In the 60s, when I was a teenager, most of the residents worked in the community. In this very nurturing environment, there were many mothers and fathers for the children, because you could enter virtually anyone's home and be treated like their own son or daughter. If this description sounds a bit like a scene from a Norman Rockwell painting or something, it is. Here, young people like me in those days learned the value of a hard day's work. We learned not to complain. We learned to respect our elders. We learned to be quiet while others spoke. We learned to remain silent if we didn't have anything constructive to say. And we learned that saying something louder or faster didn't necessarily make it sound any smarter. Mr. Speaker, having sat through only a few question periods since being elected to this House, I would suggest that these are lessons that could be of value to many members. In my formative years, we were taught to help others. In my formative years, we were taught to help others and not to expect remuneration of any kind for doing so. If there were a need, we were expected to try and meet it. It was certainly implied, though not specifically stated, that the family was the most important social unit in the world. Nothing eclipsed love and duty to family. Good parents were a gift and a blessing, grandparents a bonus. I was fortunate to have both in Anita and Bill, Bob and Ellie. Although not unique to me, I read with interest an article about the terrific mum with whom the honourable leader of the opposition was blessed. I do think because of my parentage as described, though, it would be difficult for the honourable members of this House, it would not be difficult for the honourable members of this House to understand why I would want the focus of my short or long political life to be centred on the family. Mr. Speaker, I have always been interested in politics, raised in a family where my parents were Conservatives, my grandparents Liberal. Remember, we lived in an extended family. We lived together. Elections were interesting times. Debate raged not only at home, but in the 2 local country stores. In high school, I took a course, I remember it well, called Modern World Problems. I don't know if any of you remember that, from a teacher by the name of Mr. George Jodry, a valuable teacher and a valuable mentor of mine as well. And that continued fanning the flames of my political interest, and I later studied history and political science at Mount Allison University. Where one of my academic colleagues was the Honourable Minister of Transportation, I might add. All of these things fired my interest in politics as a study and shaped me into what, in today's terms, might be called a political junkie, although in the early years I never contemplated running for public office.